Hi, good evening everyone. So you can see me, right? Yeah, I think there has been some problem with this scaling. So just give me 5 minutes. Yeah. So welcome to my YouTube channel, Learn It All. So the firstly, I would like to thank everyone who motivated me to take the online classes. The firstly, my students, and next my mother who constantly pushed me more than my students. And about me, this is me, Ashok Macha. I did my masters from IIT Kharagpur. I'm a leading faculty in many institutions, and I teach science and technology, environment and ecology, international relations. And I'm also an author of science and technology UPSC book and environment and ecology, which is yet to be published. So here in this video, we are going to discuss about the COVID-19. So the recent pandemic, which is shaking all the nations, which has actually spread across 200 and more nations and territories. So what is this virus? What is so complicated about virus? Even the last time when we heard about Nipah or Ebola, so it has actually scared lot many people. So why the virus is being so complicated? Why dealing with virus is so being complicated? So we are going to understand that today. So what is a virus? The very first thing we need to know what a virus is. Virus is a submicroscopic infectious agent that replicates only inside a living cell of an organism. So the virus is submicroscopic, so you cannot see it. Even when we first identified the virus, we actually filtered the bacteria which is of a least size. Even then, this disease actually spread. So then we were able to understand there are some microscopic particles which are smaller than that of the bacteria. So we named them viruses. So virus is a submicroscopic infectious agent that replicates only inside a living cell of an organism. This is a very important. So replicates only within the living cell of an organism. That means the virus is obligatory parasites. That means it needs a host at any cost in order to survive. So for a virus to survive, it has to depend upon a living host. Why does it have to depend upon a living host? We'll see that in the later slides. So the virus is a submicroscopic infectious agent that replicates only within the living cell of an organism. So first it has to infect a living organism. So it has to go into the cell and it has to take that particular mechanism into its own hands for it to survive. So how the virus has actually evolved? So we have different theories. We have theories like progressive theory, we have the regressive theory, and we have this precursor theory. So how the virus has actually evolved? Because since the very beginning, right? So the microscopic particles which initially formed were the bacteria. So we have these bacteriophages. The bacteriophages are the viruses which depend upon the bacteria in order to survive. So they'll infect the bacteria. So we have different theories in order to say how the virus has actually evolved, how the virus actually came into existence. So on these three theories, the first theory is the progressive theory. So which states that the progressive theory, which states that genetic elements that gain the ability to move between the cells. So what are viruses? As per that particular progressive theory, the viruses are the genetic elements that gain the ability to move between the cells. Genetical elements that gain the ability. Why these genetic elements that gain the ability to move between the cells? Because the viruses are so simple. Viruses are so simple that they consist of only the genetic material and only the nucleic acid and only the protein code. And some viruses has only the genetic material and some viruses has only the protein code. The virus doesn't have any machinery. Virus doesn't have any machinery. So because it doesn't have any machinery, it has to depend on the host. It is an obligatory parasite. It has to mandatorily survive on the living host. So the one kind of evolution says that the genetic material which gained the ability to move between the cells, right? The genetic material itself gained the ability to move between the cells. That is the progressive theory. So now the genetic material gain the mobility by infecting one cell and transferring the genetic material from one cell to the another cell, right? That is how the genetic material is moving. So next one, regressive theory, which states that previously free living organisms that became parasites. So initially, so it states that the second theory states that the viruses are actually the free living organisms. The previously during the beginning, the viruses are free living organisms that became parasites. So how did they become parasites? Because they lost the genetic material. They lost the genetic material within the due process of time. So when they lose the genetic material, so all the genes which are essential for the survival. So when I taught anthropology, so we were dealing with the housekeeping genes which are very essential for a cell in order to survive. So if those particular cell or those particular genes are absent, if the housekeeping genes are removed off, so obviously the genetic material cannot survive on its own. So those free living organisms which lost the genetic material became the parasites later on, like the viruses. So that's another theory. And the third one, the precursor theory. So the precursor theory states that, so since the very beginning, even before the bacteria, the viruses came into existence. The viruses came before the bacteria. So the life existed before, like the viruses. And then the complex beings came into existence. Those were the three theories. So there was a constant debate which theory was true, how the viruses are actually evolved. So the one theory states that the genetic elements, these are the genetic elements which gain the ability to move between the cells. And the second theory states that the previously free living organism which lost the genetic material and then they became the parasites. Because when we talk about the viruses, they replicate within the host. That means they need a living organism for them to infect. So depending upon those theories, so it was a previously free living organism which became the parasites later on. And the third theory which states that they may be the precursors of the life, because we discussed the Stanley Miller's apparatus, right, which really stated how the biomolecules actually evolved from the prebiotic soup, when all the elements existed in the prebiotic soup, right? So they came, the permutations and combinations, all the molecules combined together to give rise to the biomolecules, right? So this can be the result of those precursors. This can be the result of those combinations, the viruses, right, which were free living and then try to infect the other cells. So these are the different theories about the viruses. So we'll see in the next slide the structure of a virus, so what actually present within the virus, right? So we are seeing the viruses are very simple in nature. The viruses are very simple, it is not at all complex, right? So when we talk about the simplest nature, it has a protein, and it has a nucleic acid. So it has an envelope, the protein envelope, glycoprotein in nature. So this glycoprotein is actually essential for it to bind to the living organism, right? So when we take a living organism into the consideration, so it has some receptors within the cell membrane, right? These glycoproteins bind to those particular cell membrane and they get into the cell, right? And we have the proteins or enzymes within the virus. There are some, we know about the HIV very much, human immunodeficiency virus, that has the integrase enzyme, which is proteinaceous in nature. All enzymes are proteins in nature, right? They have some proteins, right? They have reverse transcriptase enzymes, they have a few proteins, and they have the nucleic acid, right? They have the nucleic acid, they have the protein. This is the shape of our COVID, right? Because of the crown like shape, it got its name. Because of the crown shape, it got its name, the COVID, right? The corona got its name from the crown like structure. So it has the nucleic acid, it has the protein, right? And there are some viruses which has only protein code, which doesn't have anything, and there are a few viruses which have only the genetic material. And the next one, the structure of the virus, right? This is about the HIV and this is the Nipah. So we see the common structure. We have the glycoproteins, we have the different enzymes, which have the nucleic acid, right? This is the common structure for all the different viruses. So we'll see the classification of viruses, right? Now we are going into the classification of viruses. So the viruses are millions, right? There are millions within the earth, which needs only a specific host. All the viruses need a specific host for the survival, or else they'll become inactive, So when it comes to the classification of viruses, right? So we can classify them depending upon the genetic material that is actually present, right? Depending upon the genetic material, we can classify them as DNA viruses and RNA viruses. We can classify them as DNA viruses and RNA viruses. DNA viruses, deoxyribose nucleic acid, DNA viruses. So DNA viruses are of again two types, the double-stranded and single-stranded. We humans are double-stranded in nature. The genetic material present in the humans is double-stranded in nature, right? But the complexity of the DNA in the viruses is extensive. So we have the double-stranded as well as the single-stranded, right? And when it comes to the double-stranded, we have the enveloped and unenveloped, right? We have enveloped. Enveloped means we have a protein coat. So we have a protein coat. Enveloped means we have a protein coat. Unenveloped, it doesn't have any covering, right? The DNA itself is a virus. The DNA, double-stranded DNA itself is a virus, right? And you can see the examples of the enveloped viruses, the hepatinovirus, herpes virus, and the pox virus, right? And when it comes to the pox virus, the smallpox is the one disease which has been completely eradicated from the surface of the earth. The smallpox is the disease. Smallpox is the disease which has been eradicated from the surface of the earth completely, right? And we have unenveloped, right? So we have the adenovirus and the papillomavirus, and then we have the single-stranded viruses which are unenveloped. The single-stranded viruses are unenveloped, and parvovirus is an example, right? And the next classification is the RNA viruses. And when it comes to the RNA viruses, we have the positive and the negative RNA. What is this positive and the negative? This is the strand, right? The positive sense and the negative sense. So the positive sense is nothing but the RNA which actually codes for a protein. The positive strand is nothing but an RNA strand which actually codes for a protein. And negative RNA which has to be converted into positive RNA to code for a protein. Right? The positive RNA is the one which actually codes for a protein, and negative RNA is something, right, which actually should be converted into positive RNA to code for a protein. Right? And we have double capsid. Capsid is nothing but an external envelope. Right? Other than the code, we have something called capsid. And we have the positive RNA via DNA. That means the RNA will be converted into DNA, and the DNA will actually act as a genetic material. So we have these different types of the viruses. And those viruses which has RNA positive or the negative sense strand, the viruses which have the positive or the negative sense strand, and when they attack a cell, the RNA doesn't go into the nucleus of a living organism. Instead of going within the nucleus, it will go into the endoplasmic reticulum. It will go to the endoplasmic reticulum, where you can see the more number of ribosomes which actually takes these RNAs, and they synthesize the protein. They synthesize the essential protein. But when it comes to RNA via DNA, the viruses which have the RNA, positive sense RNA, through DNA, they will have some protein called integrase, like HIV. Right? They will have some protein called integrase, and also reverse transcriptase. Right? Reverse transcriptase is an enzyme which converts the RNA into DNA. Right? The DNA will be integrated into the genetic material of a host. Right? After being integrated, right, it will capture the mechanism, cellular mechanism of a host, and it will replicate on itself. Right? So, and we have this unenveloped and the envelope, like we already discussed, and the examples are calciviruses, coronaviruses. The coronavirus is an enveloped RNA based positive strand. Right? That means the genetic material of the coronavirus will not be integrated into the genetic material of the host. Right? Genetic material of the coronavirus will not be integrated into the genetic material of the host. Clear? But when it comes to the HIV, the retroviruses, those will be integrated within the genetic material of the host. Right? So the next one, replication of the viruses. And when we talk about the replication of the viruses, right, we have two different mechanisms. Right? But the most of the viral diseases which we are facing, they follow this lytic process, not the lysogenic. So we have two different mechanisms, lytic and lysogenic. Lytic and lysogenic. Right? When it comes to the lytic enzymes, so the lytic, so here the attachment and endocytosis. Right? The cell moves within the virus moves within the living host. The virus moves within the living host after the attachment. Right? After moving in, so the RNA will be converted into the protein. The RNA will be transcribed into the protein. Those proteins, all the subunits, will be attached again as the viruses, and they break the cell and they come out and they infect the other cells. They infect the adjacent cells. That is the lytic process. So the first one is the attachment. After the attachment, so what are the proteins? The glycoproteins. Right? The glycoproteins, after they attach, right, they'll move into the host. They'll move into the living host. After moving in, they release the genetic material. The genetic material actually expresses itself. The genetic material produces the proteins which are essential. After all the proteins are actually produced, all the mechanism is actually produced, right, that subunits will attach again and they break the cell and they infect the adjacent cells. That is how the viruses are being replicated within the living host. Right? And why controlling the virus is difficult? So we are seeing, right, to get a vaccine for the corona, to design a drug for the corona. So we are estimating it takes very long time, and the research is actually being concentrated only on corona, right now. So why controlling a virus is so difficult? What is so complex about it? Right? So the first one, and to synthesize a vaccine, we are saying that it may take at least 18 months of time. To synthesize a potential vaccine for the corona, so we are saying it takes at least 18 months. So why is that? So the first one is antigenic shift and drift. So what is an antigen? So here we have to understand what an antigen is. So here we have to understand what an antigen is. So antigen is nothing but any foreign particle, right, which when enters into the body, which enters into your body, right, provokes the immune responses, right. Any foreign particle when entering into the body of any host, right, stimulates the immune response. That means the antigens produces antibodies, right. Antigens produces the antibodies. Antigens stimulate the production of the antibodies. So these antigens, which are the recognizing sequences for our body, right, antigens are the recognizing sequences of our body. So these antigens keeps on changing, right. The DNA keeps on mutating, the protein structure keeps on changing, which makes it very difficult to identify a proper place to discover a potential drug. So how do you discover a drug? So you have to understand what the mechanism is, right? You have to understand what is the conserved position is. So what position is not being changed continuously. For that particular position, you can synthesize a drug so that our immune response will identify that particular thing, right? But here in the virus, there is no proper mechanism by which you can actually zero out the constant position. So it keeps on mutating. The different strains are being produced constantly. So because of the antigenic shift and drift, it is becoming extremely difficult. It is becoming extremely difficult to identify a novel drug or to synthesize a vaccine for the viral-based diseases. The next one. Second is no synthetic machinery. There is no synthetic machinery, right? So, if there is some mechanism, if there is some proper metabolism which is happening, you can synthesize a drug to stop that particular mechanism so that the cell dies itself, right? If at all there is some metabolism which is happening, if at all there is some machinery, we humans are very complex, right? There are many organs, there are many organ systems which are interlinked together. Even if one organ system fails, right, the organism cannot survive. So because there is a metabolism, you can actually synthesize a drug which can actually kill a complex organism. But in the virus, there is no such thing as complex machinery. There is no complex machinery at all, right? So because of that, it actually depends on the other organism for the survival. It depends on the other organism for the survival. So that because there is no synthetic machinery that is present inherently in the virus, it is very difficult to synthesize a drug for the viral diseases. And the next one, why it is becoming difficult to control the viruses? Because there is no proper therapies, right? Because of the first point and the second point, because of the antigenic shift and drift, because of the no synthetic machinery, and we do not have many antiviral therapies. And there is second reason why there are not many antiviral therapies, right? Because the private enterprises show no interest in synthesizing those antiviral therapies, right? Because the private enterprises which concentrate on the money making, which concentrate more on the money making, they have to see the potential. They have to see the potential profit making to synthesize a particular vaccine or a particular drug, right? So because they do not see any, right, potential profits, so the research on the antiviral therapies is being neglected by the private enterprises, right? So because of these reasons, now it is becoming very difficult to control the viral based diseases when there is an outbreak, right? So coming to the COVID-19, so we have understood the basic structure of the viruses. We have understood what the viruses are, how the mechanism works, right? So now we'll see what the COVID-19 is. So the full form of COVID-19 is coronaviral disease, right? Coronaviral disease 2019, right? This is the novel coronavirus. It is a new coronavirus. So we have seen many myths actually that it was genetically engineered by the Chinese to capture the world economy or to become a master of global economy, right? and after the genetic sequence has been done by the experts, so we have understood the coronavirus is a novel virus which is a result of a general evolution, right? Only because of the evolutionary process the coronavirus has been synthesized, not because of any genetic engineering. So it is a myth saying that the Chinese have actually invented the corona, right? So it has become a global pandemic. So to understand the pandemic, because it is essential for the examination perspective, so we have to understand what a pandemic is. So the pandemic is nothing but a widespread, right? Because the coronavirus has actually spread to more than 200 countries and territories, right? It is widely spread. When it is widely spread, we call it pandemic. So there is some other term called epidemic, right? The epidemic. So what is this epidemic? So outbreak of a disease that spreads quickly affecting many individuals at the same time is an epidemic. So when you take a smaller geographical area into consideration, it becomes epidemic in that particular geographical area, right? Now, so if at all you leave the rest of the countries, if we concentrated more on China initially, so initially within the China it has become epidemic, right? It has become epidemic within the China, and when it actually spread its wings to the other nations, when it actually moved, when it has been moved by the people to the other nations, it has become pandemic, right? It has become pandemic, right? A pandemic is a type of epidemic, right? It is a type of epidemic, an outbreak of a disease that occurs over wide geographical area. This is important. When it comes to the difference between the pandemic and epidemic, when it comes to the difference between the pandemic and epidemic, so the wide geographical area and affects exceptionally high proportion of population. So we are seeing every day, we are seeing thousands of people being infected, being diagnosed with the virus. Yesterday itself within the India, we have seen 800 plus people being infected, diagnosed with the coronavirus. So globally around 30,000 people are being identified on the daily basis. The population has been increasing significantly, exponentially from the day after day, right? So it has become the global pandemic. The first thing about the COVID-19. The next one, and for the examination perspective, what is the control, what is the elimination, what is the eradication, right? When it comes to the examination perspective, because when they ask, right, which of the following statements are true, right? So the smallpox has been eliminated, or smallpox has been eradicated, or HIV is being controlled, corona is being controlled, right? So what do you mean by this control, elimination and eradication? So to understand this, I have put this slide, right? The first one, disease control, right? So what do you mean by disease control? The reducing the number of new infections. It is as simple as that. Reducing the number of new infections. Very simple, right? It reduces the number of new infections. That means the amount of people that are being diagnosed. So when it comes to the China, right? China has now established that the number of people that are being infected are very less. It has controlled the disease. It has controlled the disease, right? The number of people currently infected and the number of people who become sick or die from the disease in local settings, right? So this control is being achieved through different means, the vaccines, medications, contact isolations or other public health interventions, right? So that is the disease control. So what is elimination, right? Elimination means stopping the transmission of a disease in specific geographical areas or country but not worldwide. Elimination means so stopping the transmission in a particular geographical area, right? The China may now eliminate the corona, right? China may now eliminate the corona, but in the other sections of the society or in the other areas of countries, in different countries, you may actually see the people being infected by corona or have the COVID disease, right? And the eradication. The eradication is the permanent reduction of the disease to zero. Permanent reduction of a disease to zero. That means there are no new people coming with that particular disease. So that is eradication. The control, elimination and eradication. Control, elimination and eradication. Right? So with this COVID, how many countries are affected? So far, 209 countries and territories have been affected by corona. As of 8th April 2020, so there were 14,32,373 confirmed cases of corona and still raising. Still raising. Now USA has been on the top. Right? Now USA has been on the top. What are the different symptoms? What are the different symptoms? Alright? So, when it comes to the different symptoms, the most common symptoms are the fever, tiredness, dry cough. Right? So, these are the common symptoms of corona. Right? And there are a few people who may actually experience the aches and the pains. Right? But when it comes to the symptoms, so most of the people, around 80% of the people who got the infection may not develop any symptoms. They are the asymptomatic carriers. They are the asymptomatic carriers. Asymptomatic carriers, that means they will not show any symptoms, but they will carry the virus within themselves, infecting one individual and the other. The virus may show symptoms within those particular individuals, but within this particular individual, they will not show any type of infection. They will not show any type of infection. Alright? So, but 1 out of 6 people who get COVID-19 becomes seriously ill and develops difficulty in breathing. So, right? There are a few individuals, 1 in 6 people who gets infected will experience the difficulty in breathing. Right? Pneumonia-like virus. So, when the China has actually addressed this corona, they said, we have seen a new virus which has this pneumonia-like infection, right? So when you get pneumonia, so obviously you will have this breathlessness, right? And the most older people will have the serious effects, right? The older people and those with underlying medical problems, with the pre-medical conditions like the heart infections or the breathing disorders, right? Or the cancers. So those people will develop the serious illness, then they are prone to die. Right? These are the people which are actually at the disadvantage. The older people or the people with the previous medical health conditions, right? With the medical history, right? Who has these breathing problems, who have the weaker immune system. So those are the people likely to die from the COVID. Right? The people with fever, cough and difficulty breathing should seek medical attention immediately. Right? So, when it comes to the symptoms, so what is this difference between this COVID-19, common cold, flu and allergies? So, you can actually see the slide, you can actually pause after some time and you can actually see the differences which we have for the different diseases, so that you will be able to identify between the common cold, flu and the COVID-19, so that you can seek the medical attention immediately. Right? So the most common thing is the dry cough, right? The most common thing is the dry cough, right? And how does it spread, right? How does it spread? So we have seen many fake news saying that it actually spreads through the air as well, right? But it doesn't spread through air. It is not airborne disease. It is not at all airborne disease. It actually spreads through the droplets, right? When the other person coughs or sneezes or when the person talks, so through the tiny droplets which comes out of the mouth, so only through those tiny droplets, right, the coronavirus spreads from one individual to the other individuals. This is the reason why the government has been asking us to maintain the social distancing at least 1 meter distance from one individual to the other, so that you stay protected from the virus. So it actually spreads from one person to the other person, right? Through small droplets, right? And those droplets which carry the viruses can stay for hours and days depending upon the surface right, depending upon the surface. That means it doesn't actually have to transmit only through the droplets from directly from one individual to the other individual. If a person sneezes or coughs, right, the droplets on the surface of his hands, when he touches some particular surface, when you touch that particular surface after that particular person, so that may actually infect you as well through the nose or the eyes or the mouth, right? This is the problem which we are seeing these days, when the doctors are consistently asking, when you put down a mask to protect yourself from the corona virus, so do not touch your face ever again. After you put on the mask, you should not touch your face, right? Because whatever the virus that is actually present on the surface, when you touch the mask or your face, they may actually transmit to your to within your body through the eyes or the nose or any other means, right? So you should not touch your face. So either directly through the droplets from one person to the other, or through a particular surface, right? So this is the reason why the government has been asking us to wash our hands properly and constantly, right? The next one, how long does it survive on different surfaces? So we already discussed it. It takes different time period, right? Like few hours to few days as well, right? If at all there is higher temperature conditions that are being maintained, so obviously it dies at a faster rate. So if not, it stays longer depending upon the humidity or depending upon the temperature or the type of surface, right? So the next one, statistics. And one more thing, recently some IIT has actually developed the sterilization technique using ultraviolet radiation for all the packages that are being delivered, right? To sterilize the packages, they have developed a particular machine which actually costs around 500 rupees, which uses ultraviolet radiation, right? So the next one, statistics. So this was yesterday's statistics. Yesterday itself, about 800 more cases have been identified, which has actually grown to 600 and plus now, 6,000 and plus now within India, right? And the US is actually topping, right, with more than 4 lakhs and about 12 or 13,000 deaths, right? This is the statistics. And COVID-19, right? This is important from the for the prelims perspective of UPSC and as well as other examinations. So the COVID-19, right? So what is the name of the virus? The name of the virus is not coronavirus. The coronavirus or the vast number of viruses which are actually present in that particular group, right? The coronavirus is a large group of viruses, right? And our virus which is actually causing the coronavirus disease COVID-19 is SARS-CoV-2, right? SARS-CoV-2, that was the nomenclature, that was the name of the virus. Severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2. Severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2. And when we talk about severe acute respiratory syndrome, there are a few other viruses which are in this particular class. The previously we have seen SARS and MERS, severe acute respiratory syndrome previously, right, which was also a global outbreak, and also the MERS, Middle East respiratory syndrome, the Middle East respiratory syndrome, which was also a pandemic back then, so which has the highest fatality rate compared to that of the COVID-19, right? So the coronavirus is the family of viruses that causes a range of illness, right? And the SARS and MERS, this is also important for the prelims perspective. Which of the following diseases are closely associated to that of the COVID-19? SARS and MERS, right? SARS and MERS. So this has been first identified in the Wuhan, which actually got its name like the Chinese virus, which was told by USA President Mr. Trump, right? He actually coined this the Chinese virus, right? And in 1918, we have something called the Spanish, right? Flu, the Spanish flu, which actually first identified in the Spain, right? The Spanish flu, which actually killed. The estimated deaths were about 50 million, which killed more than that of the World War I, which killed more people than that of the World War I, right? The Spanish flu in 1918, which was a global disaster back then. So at that particular time as well, the government is very late to act, right? Because the government doesn't want the people to come out of the World War. It wanted the World War to continue, which actually killed about 50 million people, and the death rate was really high for that, right? So the next one, how deadly is the virus? Because we have been seeing many myths associated with that of the corona being circulated within our mobile phones, right? The constantly and continuously, right? How deadly is the virus or coronavirus? So this is the stats, right? Compared to that of the Ebola, which was a recent outbreak, and depending upon the MERS and avian flu or the tuberculosis and the SARS, the COVID-19 is way below, right? The coronavirus is the way below, right? And 2019 pandemic flu H1N1, right? Which we recently spoke about, the Spanish flu, which is commonly called as the Spanish flu, right? The fatality rate is less, very less. It is just 1 to 3% of the fatality rate. And how many people can be transmitted from one individual, right? So we have this to see how deadly the virus. We have this something called reproduction number. So reproduction number is nothing but the number of people on an average one infected person will pass the virus to. That means if I got the virus, how many people I may infect? The possible number of the probability of newer individuals I may infect is 2 to 2.5, right? For the corona, it is just 2 to 2.5, and the fatality rate is 1 to 3%, and the fatality rate depends upon the demography of that particular geographical area. Fatality rate depends upon the demography of the particular geographical area. Why it depends upon the geographical area? Because the higher the number of older people, the higher will be the fatality rate. The higher will be the fatality rate, right? And the next one, and similarities between the SARS and the COVID-19, right? Similarities between the SARS and the COVID-19, right? Both the SARS and COVID-19 originated in China. So which of the following similarities are present between the SARS and COVID-19? It can be a question. The both have been originated in China before spreading around the world, and the both are identified as new coronaviruses. The both are the coronaviruses, and the both have been originated in the China, right? And the SARS coronavirus was found to have jumped to people from the cats, right? The SARS has been with cats. So from the cats it has actually spread to the viruses, or from the to the humans. Whereas when it comes to the COVID, so it has been estimated that it has actually come from the bats, and it has passed through an unidentified intermediate mammal, right? So it has actually come from the bats and then through an intermediate mammal. Recently the Nipah, which actually spread in the Kerala, right? The Kerala has been very proactive in containing the Nipah virus, or else the India would have seen the worst viral attack the back then, right? So it has identified, so it has come through the bats. And also there is one other examination perspective question, why the bats, right? Why the bats? Because the bats or the mammals, so it can actually transmit, because we share the common ancestry, because the bats and humans share the common ancestry. The virus attacking the bats can actually transmit to the humans as well with the smaller changes. And also the bats travel longer distances. That means they may take the viruses from one area and then transfer it to the other area. That is the reason why the bats, right? We get the infections. We get the virus transmitted from the bats to the humans, right? And the both viruses cause the chaos and the economic disaster, and we are actually anticipating that we are going into the worst disaster, economical disaster we have ever seen since the Great Global Depression, right? Since the Great Global Depression. So those were the similarities. And the COVID-19 virus is not as lethal as SARS, right? It is not as lethal as SARS, but more pervasive, right? Why it is more pervasive? Why it is being, even though we are saying it doesn't transmit at the faster rate, why the more number of cases are actually increasing in number? Why the number of cases are constantly on rise? Which means when it comes to the COVID, the most of the people doesn't show any symptoms. That is a greater disadvantage. If it shows some symptoms, right? So we can identify them, we can isolate them completely, right? We can treat them. But because many people doesn't actually get identified that they have the disease, they can easily transmit from one individual to the other, right? It is easy to transmit, right? Asymptomatic carriers are more in number because they do not find any symptoms, right? So because of that, it is more pervasive, right? And also the children also do not show any symptoms. They are the asymptomatic carriers. From the children to the grandparents, it can be easily transmitted, and the grandparents may be at risk, right? Even recently, even the smaller child has been killed, which with an age of about 7 months, right, in America, right? So this is about the SARS and the COVID-19. So who does it infect? So we already discussed it, and again we are going to see. So as per the present statistics, age group, right? So demography of the COVID-19 is India shows that maximum 42% of infected or of the ages 21 to 40, 33% are of 41 to 60, and 17% are above 60, and 9% are 0 to 20 years, right? And who face the adverse effects of corona or the COVID? So the person with the weaker immune system, and the older people, and with the pre-medical health history, right? And pre-medical conditions. So those people, elderly, face a greater risk of dying of corona, right? And with the pre-existing medical conditions, so we are seeing about 10.5% of the people are dying with the cardiovascular diseases, and 7.3% for the diabetes, and 6.3% for the chronic respiratory diseases, and 6% for the hypertension, and 5.6% for the cancer. So with the people with the pre-medical health condition, even though the age was a bit less, right, they may also get seriously ill because of the coronavirus, right? The next one, vaccines and current medication. The vaccines and current medications. All vaccines works according to the same basic principle, right? So when it comes to the vaccines and current medications, the vaccines are not yet developed for the corona. So we are saying, so we have to wait for at least 18 months for a potential vaccine to develop, for a potential vaccine. And immediately in the last few days, we have actually seen this Hyderabad Central University has actually developed a potential vaccine, and there were many industries claiming that we have actually identified a potential vaccine, right? Only the vaccine, after it goes through the clinical trials, right, we can actually approve the particular vaccine. So we can develop the models for a particular vaccine, but to use for the large scale human purposes, right, the virus have to be going through must have been gone through the screening, right? It must be approved by the government, right? So that process to develop a potential vaccine, right, it takes a little more time. And thanks to our supercomputing technology, thanks to our supercomputers, we have identified a few potential vaccines already, right? We have to manufacture, we have to test them. That's the only thing which actually present over now, right? So how the vaccines actually work? What are these vaccines, right? The vaccines are the pathogens or a part of a pathogen. The vaccines can be the pathogen itself, right, or a part of a pathogen. That means the vaccine can be a virus, right, which is actually attenuated. That means which is actually weakened, right, or might be inactivated. or might be inactivated, or any part of a virus or a bacteria, or any part of virus or any bacteria, right, which provokes the immune responses. The first one, it has to be a part of it has to be a virus or a part of a virus or an organism or a pathogen, right? And the second one, what it should do, it should invoke the immune response. It should provoke the immune response. The second important thing it should do, and the third one it should do is it should not cause any disease. It should only provoke the immune response. The virus has to be good enough to provoke the immune response, but not good enough to cause a disease, right? So that is the vaccine, right? So what the vaccine does, after it enters into the body, right, it invokes the immune. That means it synthesizes the antibodies. And those antibodies, upon the actual attack, right, so they get stimulated and they neutralize the particular pathogen. So that is how the body gets immunized to a particular disease, right? And when it comes to the corona, there is no particular vaccine that is available, and clinical trials are under progress, which we already discussed, and supercomputers are being used, which identified 77 potential vaccines for us, right? So 77 of them which are promising to create an effective treatment against the COVID-19, right? So, and also we have also seen the Hydrofluoric Queen, right? Recently the India has stopped the supply of Hydrofluoric Queen. It has actually put on hold, right, the marketing of the Hydrofluoric Queen. Recently the America, USA, Donald Trump has actually asked India to waive off to export the Hydrofluoric Queen to America, right? As a good gesture, even India has actually accepted to the export of the Hydrofluoric Queen, and it has promised India, if at all the Hydrofluoric Queen, which is an anti-malarial drug, as a potential drug against the COVID-19, as a potential drug for the COVID-19, India has sufficient stock to meet the demands of India. India has sufficient stock, right? So chloroquine. So in the lab studies, it has actually seen to block the viral propagation, right? But there is no sufficient data that is available, right, to make sure the hydrochloroquine is good to directly ingest the patients, right, to actually supply. So the more data is actually needed to make sure that the hydrochloroquine is a potential antiviral drug, right? The next one, recently means just 2 hours back, right, the Australian, right, Monash University Biomedicine Discovery Institute has actually suggested that the ivermectin, which is a lice drug, which also a potential antiviral drug for the COVID-19. So within the lab studies, it has said that it is preventing the replication of the coronavirus, novel coronavirus, right? So ivermectin is also a drug, right, which is actually a potential antiviral drug, which the research has to progress, right? It has been published in the Journal of Antiviral Research. The next one, the last but not the least, all right, the myths of corona. So with the myths of corona, which are being circulated within the form, right? So we will see the myths of corona. The first one, the spraying chlorine or the alcohol on the skin kills the virus on the body. Not at all, right? So spraying alcohol is a potential antiviral, it kills. So the alcohol is a potential surface sterilization agent, right? 70% ethanol, 70% alcohol is a potential surface sterilizing agent, but you cannot put on alcohol on your body and think you are actually safe, right? Even the spraying chlorine, which actually gives you the disastrous effects rather than that of the positive effects, right? So it does not kill the viruses in the body, right? It does not kill the viruses in the body, right? It is just a surface sterilizing agent. And only adults, older adults and young people are at risk. No, not at all. Everybody is at risk with a weaker immune system. So you cannot actually think you're actually safe because you do not have any medical condition, or because you are on that particular fragment of people who are actually thought to be safe or thought to have no potential ill effects of COVID-19, right? Even though you're not at risk, you are at risk of transmitting that particular virus from one individual to the other individual who are at particular risk. So please stay safe, please stay indoors, right? Children cannot catch COVID-19. No. Children, maybe they cannot show any symptoms. The most children do not show any symptoms, but they catch COVID-19 and they are the potential asymptomatic carriers. They are the potential asymptomatic carriers. The next one, COVID-19 is just like flu, right? So we have already seen what is the difference between the symptoms between the flu and COVID-19. No, it is not. Right? It is not just like flu. You cannot just ignore the COVID-19. Right? Everyone with COVID-19 dies. Not at all. Right? We have already seen many people are actually coming out of the hospitals, being discharged from the hospitals. Right? But after being discharged, they may again get infected because of the COVID-19 or coronavirus. Right? Cats and dogs spread coronavirus. There is no sufficient evidence to state that the cats and dogs actually spread the coronavirus, and this myth has actually come forward when the people are actually abandoning their pets, being afraid that they may infect the coronavirus from the cats and dogs. No, they cannot. But recently a tiger in US has been infected with the coronavirus from the humans, right? The hand dryers kill coronavirus. No, they cannot kill the coronavirus. The hand dryers cannot kill the coronavirus, right? And SARS-CoV-2 is just a mutated form of the common cold. It is not just a mutated form of the common cold. Common cold is a different virus. The SARS-CoV coronavirus 2 has been evolved in a different form with the different symptoms. Which is highly contagious than that of the common cold, right? Which is highly dangerous than that of the common cold, right? You have to be with someone for 10 minutes to catch the virus. You have to be with someone for 10 minutes to catch the virus. There is no time restriction, all right? So it will be transmitted through the droplets. There is no time restriction to stay with a particular person so that you can catch the virus, right? The flu and pneumonia vaccines protect against COVID-19? Not at all. Not at all. There is no potential vaccine as of now. And the virus originates in the laboratory of China. We already said it was a myth, right? It was naturally evolved. It was naturally evolved. And the outbreak began because the people ate bad soup. Not at all. Not because of the bad soup, and also not because of the Chinese food, right? So it is not because of the soup, right? It has originated in the within the bat and with an intermediate mammal, to the humans. All the global communities are actually trying to identify how the virus has actually spread to the humans so that they can actually tackle this particular problem at a faster rate when there is another outbreak in the future, right? The next one, rinsing the nose with the saline protects against the coronavirus? Not at all. It may actually ease the breathing problems which you have, right? But it will not protect against the coronavirus. You can protect yourself by gargling bleach. Don't do that, please, right? And antibiotics kill coronavirus. Antibiotics act against the bacteria, not against the viruses, right? Antibiotics act only against the bacteria, not against the viruses, right? Thermal scanners can diagnose coronavirus? Not at all. Thermal scanners will be able to identify whether you have the fever or not, which is one of the symptoms of the corona. which is one of the symptoms of the corona, but that will not actually diagnose the coronavirus, right? Garlic protects against the coronavirus, not at all. The garlic has antibacterial properties, yes, but not against the coronaviruses. And the parcels from China can spread coronaviruses, not at all. Not all parcels. So, the parcels from the China will be safe because they will be transferred through a particular days, and the virus cannot survive outside the human host for a quite long time, right? So they cannot spread the coronavirus until or unless the person who came with the particular parcel to deliver it to you has the coronavirus. It cannot actually transfer, right? You can catch the coronavirus from eating Chinese food, not at all. You can happily enjoy the Chinese food provided it is properly cooked. And you can catch coronavirus from the urine and the feces, right? So recently we have seen the virus identified in the feces as well, the coronavirus being identified in the feces as well, but so far when they actually ingest into a body, it will be digested, or the bacteria will be, the virus becomes inactivated and dead within the stomach because of all the acidic content that is actually present, because of the toxic, because of the acid and the digestion process, and because of the enzymes, right? You may be able to identify, but it will not be contagious, right? You cannot catch it from the urine and the feces, right? And the virus will die off when temperature rise in the spring, right? So that was one of the myth which we had seen in the recent times, right? So when the temperature rises, the virus actually dies automatically because it cannot tolerate the surface, it cannot survive within the extreme conditions, but that is actually proved to be false. So the areas with the higher temperature conditions as well have the rise in the corona viral disease, right? Coronavirus is the deadliest virus known to man. Not at all. It is not the deadliest virus. So we are not on the verge of apocalypse, right? We are not at a verge of apocalypse. We have actually seen the deadliest virus in the recent past, Ebola, right? It is not as it is not even few percent. The percentage is closer to that of the Ebola, right? So these are the myths, and now coming to the insights into the examination. Now insights into the examination, the few questions we will see, which with the prelims perspective. So how does coronavirus transmit? The first one, when a person sneezes or cough, droplets spread in the air or fall on the ground and nearby surfaces. And if a person is nearby and inhales the droplets or touches the surfaces and further touches his face, eyes and mouth, he gets such an infection, right? The first one, through the droplets and through the surfaces. Yes, both, right? And if the distance is less than 1 meter from the infected person, yes, right? All the above are correct. This is how the virus transmits. And the next question, World Health Organization on 11th February 2020 announced an official name for the disease that is causing 2019 novel coronavirus outbreak. What is the name of the disease? COVID-19. Coronaviral disease 19. COVID-19. Right? That was the name of the disease. The next one. Insight into examination. Next question. Which of the following diseases are related to coronavirus? We already know that SARS and MERS are the diseases related to that of the coronavirus. SARS and MERS are the diseases related to that of the coronavirus. What is the full form of the SARS? Severe acute respiratory syndrome. And full form of the MERS? Middle East respiratory syndrome. Right? And which of the following is the name of the virus causing COVID-19 disease? COVID-19 disease. So, severe acute respiratory syndrome virus 2. Right? Severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 is the name of the virus causing COVID-19. The next question, which of the following statements are true with respect to the recent events? Which of the following statements are true with respect to the recent events? Isolation separates 6 persons. Statement 1, isolation means it separates the 6 person with the contagious diseases from the person who are not sick. Isolation separates the sick person with the contagious disease from person who are not sick. And quarantine separates and restricts the movement of the people who are exposed to that of the contagious disease to see if they become sick, right? So isolation is something which actually separates a sick person from the unsick person, right? That is isolation. And second statement is saying that the quarantine is something that separates and restricts the movement of a people who are exposed to that of the disease to see if they become sick. That means we are not at all sure whether they are sick or not, whether they have the disease or not. They may be exposed to that of the particular person. That means the quarantine, right? And we have some other term called self-isolation. Self-isolation is you yourself imposing an isolation, right? You yourself or quarantining yourself, that is the self-isolation, right? So both the statements are true, not to be confused. Both the statements are true, right? Both 1 and 2, right? So my next video will be the mains perspective. So we will be discussing socio-economic and ecological, also the political impacts of corona on India and the world. The next video will be after 2 days, and the next video covers the socio, political, economic and ecological impacts of corona on India and the world. Right? And you can contact me on my Telegram group. You can ask any queries. You can actually ask the queries on the comment section below as well, if at all you have any queries. And whatever the queries you have in this particular video, I will be addressing those in the next video, right? And also you can contact me with this mail ID. And please do like and share and subscribe, right? Thank you. See you.